In this lesson, we'll learn about transmission and transparency or RayDepth. Before getting started, let's see what we have in the scene. The lighting setup is exactly like previous lessons. And we want to focus on these four glasses for the time being. These four glass objects have this glass shader applied to. In the lesson that we discussed transmission samples, I briefly showed you how to create a glass shader using standard surface, or just you can simply use the glass preset up here. Now in this scene, I have decreased the roughness value to about 0.01, so we have a clear glass shader instead of a frosted blurry one. Now besides transmission, we have another thing called transparency or opacity. As you can see, I have these four cubes under this cloner. Let me just unhide them and hide the glasses for now. And let's just create a new Arnold standard surface shader and apply this to the cube here and rename it to transparent. Let's change the base weight to something like 0.85, 0.9 and change the color to this green color maybe. And let's set the specular weight to 0 so we don't get any specular reflections. If you come down to the geometry section of the standard surface shader, you can see we have an option called cut out opacity. This is exactly like the alpha channel in Cinema 4D. You can use this opacity to create semi-opaque, transparent, or fully opaque shaders. For example, you can apply a checkerboard pattern to this channel or to this value. Where the pattern is white, you're going to get fully opaque surface, and where there is black, the surface would be completely transparent. You can see by default is white, so the objects are completely opaque unless we make this color darker to get semi-transparent objects. Now let me reduce the opacity to a mid-gray color. Now we have a semi-opaque shader, and let's just apply it to our transparent cubes. You can see how it affects the cubes later on, but for now, as you can see, nothing has changed in the IPR, and in order to actually see transmissive and transparent object correctly, as we discussed before, we need to apply an Arnold parameter tag and disable the opaque option. So let's do that for the cube. Now as you can see, our green cubes are semi-opaque. Now let me copy this tag onto our transmissive glass as well, so we don't have any problem with that too. Now let's open up our render setting and discuss transmission and transparency RayDepth. Let me just for now hide the cubes and unhide the glasses and focus on them for now. Now transmission RayDepth controls the maximum number of times a ray can be refracted. At the moment, our transmission RayDepth is 8, and that is why we see some of the glass panes clear and some of these glass panes, as you can see, are black in the render. If I set the transmission RayDepth to 0, you can see our glasses no longer have any refractive or transmissive quality. We only see the specular reflections on them. And as I start to increase my transmission RayDepth value, we slowly get rid of those black panes, because we are, by increasing our transmission RayDepth, allowing our transmission or refraction rays to propagate further in the scene. We have four glasses, and if I get closer, you can see, because the model has thick walls, basically each glass has two fronts and two backs. So we need so we have basically 4 panes for each glass, and we have 4 glasses, so 4 by 4. We need at least 16 transmission ray depths so our transmission ray can evaluate all the glasses correctly in the scene. But the problem is, as you notice, increasing transmission ray depth only reveals more glass panes until we reach the value of 10 ray depth. And as I'm increasing it to be more than 10 so we can get rid of the remaining black panes, it does not change anything. And that is because our total ray limit is set to 10 up here. Total ray depth controls the maximum number of bounces any ray type can have in the scene. So because the total limit is set to 10, none of these ray types can have more than 10 depths. So let's increase the total limit In this case, we only need 16 for our transmission rate depth, so let's make sure the total limit is 16, and now I can increase my transmission rate depth to more than 10 and get the expected results. In this case, let's set it to 16, and now we have clear glass panes all around. Now let me just unhide the cubes and hide the glasses. Next we have the transparency rate depth. Here you can control the number of allowed transparency or opacity hits. Let's focus on our green cubes that we have our transparent shader applied to. At the moment, the transparency depth is 10, so we can see our transparent cubes the right way. We have only 4 cubes, they have only a front and a back pane, so 8 transparency depth would be probably enough. Now let's decrease our transparency depth to 0 and see what's going to happen. First of all, as you can see, our transparent cubes are solid and fully opaque, and as I increase my transparency depth, we are getting our transparent cubes back one by one. So by increasing this value, we are allowing more rays to pass through our transparent surfaces, and also setting this value to a low number like 0 make Arnold to treat the object as an opaque object. Now always remember, in the ray depth section of the render setting, you control the number of bounces any ray type can have, but to increase the quality and reduce the noise amount, you need to use the sampling section. And in this lesson, for example, if we had the right number of transmission ray depth, but our refractive object, for example, our glass has a roughness value of, let's say, 0.2, and it looked noisy, we need to go to our sampling section and increase the transmission sampling to get rid of the noise. And in our previous lesson, when we were discussing our specular ray depths, the same thing. If the spheres, the reflective spheres had a rougher kind of metal material, and we saw some noise in our secondary specular reflections, we needed to increase our specular samples and not our specular ray depths. Okay, we are done with the sampling and ray depth. SSS and volume sampling and ray depth settings will be discussed in their respective lessons. The boring stuff is done, and from the next section we discuss lighting in Arnold for Cinema 4D. And this is Kamal Khazri from ograph+.com, and I hope you are enjoying this course. See you in the next section.